So yeah, I heard about that and I was like, fuck, that's really, really cool. It seems like the modern education system is running out a little bit.
It's completely broken.
It's completely broken. I don't know if it was like not broken in the first place. I'm not really sure, but
I think it has been for a long time, but it's definitely got worse.
yeah. And I think people are starting to notice that, right? So yeah, I heard about that and I just thought that was personally really interesting. I think alternative education is going to be a dramatic part of our future in Australia.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how it's going to go yet.
Yeah. It's nice to be part of it, part of that journey.
I'm definitely interested in how you got into it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about the COVID stuff and things like
Absolutely.
things like that.
I've been pretty outspoken about it.
Yeah.
Like in 2021, I think I told you I did a podcast with a British journalist.
Yeah.
So it was obviously he was in London and I was here. And it was at the time that I was losing my job.
Yeah.
And he was interviewing people from all over the world, like nurses from Queensland. And he interviewed a lot of Australians because our measures were so strict.
Yeah.
And so many people were losing their jobs over this.
Yeah.
So it was at a time where, I was really upset and it was really raw.
Yeah.
So that was, I wanted to get the word out there. I was like, it's so wrong. you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
What was the trigger for you? Like when COVID all kicked off, what life experience was or whatever it was led you to being so vocal about it?
Because I felt it was so unjust.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that it was probably, I think, so I only got into teaching in 2021 was my first year of teaching.
Yeah.
So I went to uni, much later in life to do the course.
Yeah.
And it was my absolute passion to become a teacher. First year out, and by the end of that year, I was kicked out. So
you were kicked out
of school, of teaching.
Yeah.
In my first year. Didn't even get to say goodbye to my students. But around June time of that year, all the other teachers were getting vaccinated. And I was very vocal to my assistant principal and principal and said, this isn't for me. I had a brain aneurysm the year before that.
Whoa.
Yeah. And, I could have died and it was really, really scary. And I'd had brain surgery and I'd recovered really well. I'd still completed my uni degree. And I was looking at the research from overseas. Most of my family are in England. And I was looking at the data from America as well and seeing that because they'd had this vaccine rollout before us, there were side effects, and there were a lot of them and they weren't being spoken about in the mainstream media.
Yeah.
So you had to seek, look elsewhere for this information. And I could see that one of those side effects was brain aneurysms or aneurysms in general. So many heart issues. My partner had a stroke in previous years and he was adamant that he didn't want to have this vaccine that could potentially give you another life-threatening injury.
Yeah.
And we thought we'd rather take our chances against a cold or the flu. I'd rather get that than have another aneurysm or a heart attack or a stroke.
Yeah, of course.
But nobody seemed to care about that. No one was listening. My doctor wouldn't give me an exemption. I went to another doctor. They wouldn't give me an exemption. So I was straight up with, my principal at school and I just said, I'm not having this vaccine. And then it came to, I think, the September and it was announced that it was mandated and that we had to have it in order to teach.
Yeah.
And I just said, well, I'm not. And it was like, well, that's it then.
And that was it.
That was
There was no leeway on it.
No. So I think I continued teaching until the end of October. We were in and out of lockdowns that whole year. So at that point, I was still just having Zoom teaching with my class.
Okay, so you could work from home.
Yeah, everybody was.
Yeah.
And then it was a point where we had like a staged return to school and the kids were coming 2 or 3 days in person and the rest was online learning. I wasn't allowed to return on site, but for 2 weeks I could continue with the online learning. And then I wasn't allowed to do anything. And the last 6 weeks of that year, another teacher had to come in and replace me.
Wow. That blows my mind that you weren't able to get any form of exemption in that time? Because I feel like a brain aneurysm is a pretty extreme case that would warrant
Well,
it.
my doctor, who I'd been through the whole aneurysm thing with, I went into him with a big folder of information, and I even asked him to look it all up himself, and he did. He went on the TGA website. He went on the VAERS website from the States. He could see the vaccine injuries that were occurring. And he still said to me, you know more about this than I do. I opened his eyes a bit to it.
Yeah, right.
And he said, but I still have to recommend that you take the Pfizer shot, because his hands were tied. If he did otherwise, he could have been
That's his
held
career on the line as well.
AFRA would have got rid of him.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Far out.
So that was that.
That's so extreme.
Yeah, it was.
And so this was the end of 2021.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And Victorian teachers also didn't receive their holiday pay if they weren't vaccinated.
Really?
Yeah. So I lost out on my whole 6 weeks holiday pay. That I'd been working the whole year. It was only the last 6 weeks that I wasn't allowed to work.
Yeah.
I did fight that. Like, I went to many different organizations to fight that. I still have an ongoing fight with someone helping me.
Really?
Yeah. It's now progressed to a human rights discrimination claim.
Whoa.
It probably won't ever come to anything, but I'm not going down with that fight.
Yeah, you're happy to continue pushing it.
Absolutely, because I think people need to be held accountable for what they did.
100%.
They ruined careers, they ruined lives. I wasn't allowed to teach or work for 9 months.
Far out. And you have a family, you have a life going on which you need to afford and pay for.
Exactly.
It's a pretty difficult position to be put in.
Yeah, it was awful.
Far out. And throughout this time, were there other teachers that you were working with who were in the same boat? Did you have anyone around you who were feeling the same as you?
In the whole cohort from my year at uni, I'd say there were about 150 people.
Yeah.
I have a couple of friends who really did not want to get it, and they held out for as long as possible. But in the end, they needed to work, so they got it.
Yeah.
I only know of one other person who didn't get it and lost her job as well.
Went through the same thing.
Yeah.
How are they doing now?
They haven't gone back to teaching. They've gone in a different career path altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It blows my mind that, like, we're hearing more and more, the more and more that I speak to people, just so many people coming out of the woodworks who are just have been in the exact same position as you, where there's this ultimatum that they essentially can't get past, and there's just no flexibility.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so from this point, you were being vocal just with whoever you knew, friends, so on and so forth, throughout that time. How was it received by everybody else that you knew, the stance that you took?
Some people, I think, got sick of me talking about it, and, they didn't really want to receive the information.
Yeah.
Some probably do believe that I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Whatever. People have always thought strange things about me, and that's just part of who I am. Some family members were very supportive, whether, some got back, some didn't.
Yeah.
One friend and I fell out completely over it, and I don't think we'll ever be friends again, because I just think we think too differently.
Yeah.
And there's no point. I didn't want it to come to a big argument.
Yeah.
And it's very hard catching up with friends if you feel that you're censored and you can't talk about important issues in the world.
Of course.
Because it's not only the vaccine, there's so much more going on. This
Yeah.
was just a catalyst for a whole lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd rather step back from this friendship and end on a peaceful note than continue and feel like I can't ever speak my mind.
Yeah.
Or if I do, that it could, end in a really bad argument.
And it's quite surprising how many times in a situation you probably have to just either be quiet or you're facing that possibility of completely destroying whatever relationships around you. It surprised me a lot in my own personal experiences, and from just hearing from friends and everything like that as well, how many people turned on each other just like that.
Yeah.
just out of nowhere. It's crazy when something like that comes to a society, how quickly everybody can just turn on their friends and family. Like
that's
instantly.
what shocked me.
Yeah.
I was amazed. Like, I think the government and the media did such a good job of instilling fear in people that they did turn on others because they believed that we weren't doing the socially responsible thing, that we were going to be the cause of, this massive spread of COVID to the vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the information and they didn't seek the information. They just believed what they were spoon-fed.
Yeah.
And I've never been that type of person. I've always critically thought and analysed about things and asked questions. And when there were no answers or answers that made no sense, it just made me question more and more and more.
It's like, why would I do this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then from there, it's led you, and I'm interested because I really want to know how from this moment it's led you into doing the work that you're doing now.
Okay.
And maybe it's probably good to highlight just for everybody listening, what is the setup of the way that you teach now?
Okay, so for 9 months I couldn't teach at all.
Yeah.
But during that time, I went back to uni online and completed a grad certificate of education research. So that was keeping me mentally stimulated while I was socially ostracized, basically. And I was also researching the homeschool community or any avenue that I felt that I might be able to continue teaching in. So I looked at Montessori, I looked at Steiner, doors were closed. I looked at cooperative setups who, were completely run by parents in some of the smaller little towns outside of Melbourne. And they were also, you've got to be vaxxed. And I was like, well, where am I going to teach? So I started visiting people in homeschool setups. Some were, play dates in the park. Some were coffees at people's houses. And I was learning about the homeschool environment and how families manage that.
Yeah.
Because they do it very differently. So I had to learn a lot to see what those families wanted for their children, how they taught them at home, and how having a teacher part-time could benefit their children. And it seemed that some people were really after having a couple of days a week with a teacher to facilitate small group learning that they couldn't replicate at home.
Yeah.
Because if you've only got 1 or 2 kids at home, there's only so much they can do together in learning. So I was lucky to I stumbled across another little setup. I went to visit. The teacher and I just clicked instantly. We were totally on the same page. And a couple of months later, she messaged me and said, next year, I'm going to be working with this group. Would you like to come and join us? We need a second teacher.
Whoa.
And I was like, yeah, that sounds brilliant. I'd love that. So this teacher, this was all of last year, all of 2023.
Yeah.
So this teacher was teaching the 4 and 5-year-olds, and I had a group of 6 to 9-year-olds, and we run 2 days a week from 10 till 2 each day, and the parents have organised where we operate from, and they do a parent roster, so you always have a helper. And us teachers, we turn up, we plan the content, and we teach the small groups.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
How many children in total do you have?
There's about 20 in the group. There's more in the younger group than the older group. So we do have space for a few more in the older group.
And is it difficult to get doing something like this, like getting approval? Like in terms of the regulatory side of things? Like,
I don't deal with that. I don't know anything about it. That's left to the parents.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they organise all that.
And then they can bring you in as a teacher to do your thing?
Because it's basically just like a tutor going to someone's house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you feel like the kids respond to that sort of learning?
They love it.
They love it?
And in the last year, they have made so much growth. And for me as a teacher to be able to work with just a small group, I mean, they're so lucky because they get so much more than what they would in school. In school, because I do still teach in schools 2 or 3 days a week.
Yep.
You have about 25 kids in a class, 1 teacher. You know, you're lucky if you get to spend 5 minutes with a kid each day. In this setup, I am working one-on-one with them all the time, as and when they need me. And even though there's an age range and an ability range, because it's such a small group, I can modify things so easily for each child, or extend this one, or work more hands-on with this one who needs a little bit of extra support, you know. So as a teacher, it's super rewarding. The kids, I have a really great connection and rapport with them, and their confidence and self-esteem has grown so much this year. And I know that the families are so happy with how their kids are learning, and learning not only from me, but from each other.
Yeah.
You know, and they'd play a lot of games and maths games, and we do little excursions and stuff that you just don't get to do in schools.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And so with these, I presume many of these children were in formal school prior to COVID kicking off.
Yeah.
Obviously, some of them are quite young, so they might not have been in school at that point. But
the younger ones have never had any formal schooling, but most of the kids in my group have.
Wow. And so how do they ever talk about their experience between
they love homeschooling
school before?
And it's not because they're sitting around at home, you know, just playing. They're not. These families, and I know it's not the same with all homeschooling families.
Of course.
But these families are really proactive. You know, they have their structure. So Monday and Tuesday, they're with me. The rest of the week, they do other catch-ups. They do excursions together. Most of them speak a second language. They play piano. They do sports. Some do kumon. They are so well-rounded. And they probably do a lot more than what a child would receive in a regular school setup.
Yeah, because I was thinking about that, because if they're doing, like, I was trying to think, like, realistically, how much time does a child need to be spending at school in, like, the normal structure?
Yeah.
You know, like 6.5 hours a day learning all those classic subjects. Like, when I recall my experience of school, it feels like if it was set up in a different way, you would need a fraction of the time to kind of learn all of that same information.
Yeah, you do.
Whilst you can do everything else.
Yeah.
And I guess they're still getting this social aspect from it as well, because I know
that's a big part of it.
Because I know that when I've spoken to people about homeschooling, one of the biggest arguments is, well, no, you go to school so you can learn the social skills, because that's the most important thing that you need in life, which I can see by the setup that you've got going on is different to maybe some children out there who are just doing homeschool and they're by themselves all day.
And I think for the parents, the big focus is they want their kids to come to this group because they mix with the same kids every week. So they build those friendships.
Yeah.
Some of the homeschool meetups that they have, you know, one week you'll go and some kids will be there. The next week they won't be there.
Yeah.
But here they have that consistency and they know every week those friends will be there and they all get to work in a group together. Sometimes I separate them and I'll have those two kids working together and those two kids working together. Sometimes I have like ability working together. Sometimes I have very different ability working together so that they can learn from each other as well.
Yeah.
My big focus is on developing their social skills.
Yeah.
So whatever we do, it's about collaborative learning. It's about taking turns. It's about sharing. Because sometimes if you're just at home and it's just you and your parents, you can, you know, you get a lot more attention and time to talk.
Of course, yeah.
And they have to learn how to take turns and let others talk.
Yeah.
So we're covering a lot of social etiquette and social well-being and, just how to be a member of society, you know, in a community.
Yeah, of course. And so then you said that you have one of the parents from whichever family will sit in with you and help out and get amongst it basically on any given day.
Yeah, which is great for the parents because they love that. They can see exactly what their kids are learning and not only what they're learning, but how I teach that. Yeah. Because then they can replicate some of that at home as well.
Because I think that's one of the biggest fear for a lot of parents out there at the moment is they feel like they don't know what their children are learning in school. Like they don't know what they're being taught or how they're being taught, what kind of information is being given to them. And they have no control over it, basically.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Whereas so we work Mondays and Tuesdays together. And on Tuesday afternoon, I send a whole group chat message about everything that I've covered, including photos of what we've done in those sessions as well, so that they know that when they continue with their own learning at home, this is a focus that we've been working on this week. They can continue, going on that. And for their own homeschooling records, they need to keep account of what their kids are learning.
Yeah.
So they can say, like, this week in literacy, this has been covered, so they can tick the boxes.
Because there's certain
as well.
markers that have to be covered in when you're registered under homeschooling, right?
Yeah.
Like you still have to accomplish certain things across the board.
Yeah, and I think they have to keep like a portfolio or some evidence of learning. So by me supplying this information every week with photos and their workbooks, they've got all that evidence. It makes it super easy for them to keep track of that.
And do you know of other groups who are doing the same thing as you?
Yeah.
You do?
There's not many, but there is one out my way.
Yeah.
And they're doing it on a bigger scale.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they operate 5 days a week, and I think 2 days is one age group, then 2 or 3 days a different age group. So they cater from prep to year 6, whereas we only cater from, I'd say, like pre-prep, like maybe kinder, to about grade 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not a teacher, obviously, so my understanding of the education system is pretty limited in terms of how flexible and how much freedom that you have in, like, say, a state school. When you're in the state school, how much freedom did you have to be able to teach what you want, or were you following a pretty rigid structure?
Yeah, not much freedom at all.
Yeah.
Which now I love, because my planning is less, but it's more thorough.
Yeah.
Because I'm planning for exactly what those kids need. And because I've only got such a small class, it doesn't take me, I'd say in the state system, I'd be working 60 hours a week, but paid for 38.
Yeah.
So now I spend less time planning, but I'm giving so much more to the kids.
Yeah.
And I don't have all the assessments and paperwork and issues going on within school and with parents. If the parents have an issue or a problem, because there's so few of them, the communication is direct, it's instant. They either chat to me when they pick their kids up or quick message, and everything gets resolved.
Because everybody would be on it all the time, right? So you can just, like you said, through your communication, you can just constantly work with each other and upgrade. I guess I'm sure this is one reason. I'm sure there's other reasons for it, but when it comes to exams and marking papers and ticking everything off, it's really just to make sure that all the right things are happening, because it's on such a large scale. It's pretty hard to really be personable and watch it all happening, essentially. So the teachers and the parents need to see some sort of proof, right?
Yeah.
But in your system, it seems that they can just, everybody can see what's going on at all times.
All times, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. That is seriously so cool.
Well, what I love about it is I also feel like I'm now part of a community of really like-minded people.
Yeah.
We're all on the same page. And the reasons why these parents don't want their kids in school, I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
I know what they don't want their kids to be taught. Yeah. I know what they do want their kids to be taught. And I cover that and I share that with them and I check in with them. And the kids get a lot of freedom in what they learn as well.
Yeah.
So I'm always asking the kids, what are you interested in? We do things like passion projects where each child would choose a topic of their interest. And for maybe 5 or 6 weeks, we work on that as a group, but they're all doing their own independent research. We don't use IT at all.
Yeah.
So they bring books in.
Yeah.
They might print some information off at home and bring it in. So they're learning how to do their own research and how to summarize information.
Yeah.
And they're learning all these skills, but in a far more interesting and holistic way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can get pretty dry. I remember school, and for me, I didn't find it interesting whatsoever. And there was a massive disconnect. Like I don't feel that I had a real connection with any of my teachers at any point in my schooling time. Yeah. So to hear something like that is amazing.
Yeah.
With the parents, I don't know if you can speak on it or not, but what are the common themes of why parents would even choose to go down this path, other than the ones that were previously talked about? But yeah, what's the common themes between the parents of how they've even come to making that decision?
A lot of them was when they were worried that their kids were going to need to be vaccinated to be in school.
Yeah.
They didn't like their kids wearing masks in school.
Yeah.
They also felt that there was a lot of indoctrination in terms of content that's taught in school. Some of them always knew that they were going to homeschool. They were never going to, and some kids have never been to mainstream school. They've been homeschooled since birth, basically.
Okay.
But most in my group were pulled out in 2021.
So they've all just looked at it and gone, nah, I'm not having this.
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing for children as right. They would have had to be vaccinated to go to school.
No, they didn't.
They didn't?
But we were threatened that they would be.
Yeah.
So I think they were getting out before it got to that.
Was there a fear, I don't know if this is too extreme, but was there a fear that if you just left your child at school for too long unattended that they would just roll in and vaccinate everybody?
I think there was a fear of that because I know it was happening, like these vaccine buses were turning up at schools in England, and I think parents were really worried that that was going to happen here.
Yeah, just without approval, it was just giving it to everybody.
Yeah.
I remember vaccines happening at my school or my primary school when I'm younger, and obviously I was so young, so I don't understand how they followed like getting approval for things like that. But from my perspective at that point in time, it seemed like they just rolled in and started vaccinating people.
Yeah. I remember, so we moved here when my kids were 5 and 8. We moved from England.
Yeah.
And the kids did get vaccinations at school, but you did have to have parent permission before that went through.
Okay, yeah. And so with this new model, I guess, of educating children, at what point do you think it becomes too big? Like you mentioned, this other group is doing it on a larger scale. Do you think that the best way is it just stays small scale groups all over Melbourne or all over town?
I think there's definitely potential for my group to grow in size.
Yeah.
Like I think it would be great for us to have one more teacher and we could open that up to then grades 4 to 6.
Yeah.
Which would be really great. I think keeping the small class size, like ideally no more than 8 in a class, is perfect for the kids and for us, because then you can still keep it very much what the parents want for homeschooling. But if the group is too small, it limits what you can do, like the games you can play. And there's so much like team building, stuff like that. But if there's only 4 in your group, 2 and 2, it's not a really big team. So yeah, I think we definitely have room to grow. And I'd love to see more of these popping up all over the place as well.
It'd be pretty cool. It seems to me, from my perspective, that a lot more parents seem to be wanting to go that direction, but just have no idea how to get into it.
Yeah, and it's pretty scary. Like the thought of you being totally responsible for your child's education and maybe not being sure yourself how to achieve that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility because some children, as they get older, decide they do want to go to school.
Yeah.
Like I know kids who were homeschooled all through primary, but then in high school said to their parents they wanted to go to school, but probably for the social aspect, who knows.
Yeah.
But if they're not up to level, it's really hard to integrate.
Yeah.
So, the homeschooled families, it's a big responsibility. And if your child wants to go on to further education after school as well, will they be able to? Have you kept their level up to the point where they're able to access, uni or whatever they want to do?
Yeah, so there's still a pretty important element of they have to be following certain guidelines and making sure they're ticking the right classic sort of boxes, mathematics, English, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So because I have such limited time with my students, we only have 4 hours, 2 days a week.
Yeah.
The focus is literacy and numeracy, but I don't just do straight reading or writing. I'll always include inquiry, or I call it the world around us. So we'll learn a topic, usually of their interest, and we'll extend upon that topic through a written or reading or oral task.
Okay,
so
cool.
we include everything, but covering lots at the same time.
Yeah. And do you know of anyone doing it older than year 6?
Yes. So this year I'm going to start teaching 2 sisters on a Friday. They're going to be coming to my house and they will be grade 6 and 8.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Right on. That's awesome.
Yeah. And they were teacher at a private school in Melbourne, but they've been homeschooling for about the last 3 years as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Far out. So there's quite a lot of people out there doing it.
Yeah.
I know that there's a big fear with some parents that I've spoken to that they're, I don't know if this is just coming, where this information is coming from, but there's this big fear of negligence, you know, like if you try and take your education into your own hands and how you're going to raise these kids, like you're going to be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
You know, like it's misguided or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, parents do question themselves with that. They want to make sure that they're doing the best for their kids. And I think it is very brave of them.
Yeah.
Even though when I say that to many of the homeschool parents, they go, no, it's not brave at all. It's just the perfect thing. So I think you have to have some confidence in yourself and definitely join homeschool groups because there's a lot of support out there. I mean, there's a lot of local groups, but there's also national groups that you can get the support from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they guide you all the way. And there's online programs that you can follow, so you can still do that from home as well.
So you don't necessarily just have to cut
alone.
off from the world and do it alone.
That would be a really bad idea.
I'd say
you
why
need that
is
support. Because I think you need that community around you.
Yeah.
So that you can still give your kids those social meetups as well.
Yeah.
The thought of just having your kids at home 5 days a week, just sitting at the kitchen table doing work.
Could be a little bit odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the social aspect of learning and socializing in general is really important for all human development. So for the parents as well, to get out and chat to those other homeschool parents, you know, they get ideas from each other.
Yeah.
And they can do stuff together with their kids, like excursions. My group go to museums and to theatre and all that stuff together.
And then I guess the parents probably get so much value from having someone like yourself showing up a couple of days a week because it can keep, I guess you're updating their knowledge about where to move forward, right?
Yeah, I think it gives them some peace of mind. And like one of my students, he did prep for 6 months and then he didn't like school at all and it was really struggling and it was the time of the lockdowns and all that. So his parents took him out of school.
Yeah.
So he hasn't had any schooling, no tutoring, nothing for 1.5 years by the time he came to me. So all of his skills were quite low.
Yeah.
But within this year, he's gained so much confidence. He's really improved. And more than anything, his self-esteem and his confidence is sky high. You know, he
amazing.
Loves coming to learning group. He's so excited. You know, I have such a good bond with him. And his mum says, you know, it's because of the bond that you have with him that he wants to learn.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that for me is the most important thing, no matter where I'm teaching. It's creating that rapport with a child so that they know that I really care about them and whatever their struggles are, we'll work through it together, you know. And so long as you just give your best and you give everything a go and you keep an open, like a growth mindset, that's how we're going to progress and get through it, you know. And if they're struggling with something, it's more you just don't know it yet. But with patience and perseverance and maybe trying things in a different way, you'll grasp that, you know, and then they feel so proud of themselves and it's awesome.
And do you feel like from your university studies, the way that the system's currently set up, do you feel like that is, I guess, adequate education for teachers to step into a role like this? Because it's sounding to me like you have potentially quite a natural ability for this, and just from your own life lessons, you've learned a lot of how you want to do things.
Yeah.
But do you think that just from going to university, teachers are going to be able to get the skills to be able to run something like that, which is they have a lot more freedom?
I think it depends on your outlook in life.
Yeah.
And all the experiences that everyone carries. I think your first year of teaching when you leave uni, no matter where or how you do that, is pretty daunting.
Yeah.
You know, you have so much to learn.
Yeah.
But you're always learning as a teacher or as a human. We're always learning. So, you know, nothing goes well all the time and we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
But so long as we learn from those mistakes and we just try it differently next time. And I'm really honest with all the kids I teach, whether it's in a mainstream school or my homeschool kids. You know, I make mistakes too. And I love them to see that because then they see that it's okay to make mistakes and we're all human. And as long as we don't get down about that, and think, oh, I'm really bad at this, I'm just not even going to bother trying. It's turning it around. It's like, okay, that didn't work, never mind. And we always have a laugh. I laugh with my students so much. I'm like, oh my goodness.
You gotta have fun.
Yeah. I'm like, look what I just did. And they're like, oh, Jane. I'm like, I know. We just make it fun. And it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. That's how we all learn.
Yeah.
And when they do make a mistake, we'll discuss those mistakes, have a laugh, and just say, let's try it differently. Let's maybe get some materials if it's something in maths. Seems like you're not understanding this part, so let's just go back to the basics. You work through it together, and it's like a light bulb moment. They get it, and then we're like, yes, and we celebrate each other.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's so good. And I was just thinking about this as you were speaking. With these smaller groups happening, when it comes to parents and having their own way that they want their children to be raised, it seems like that's almost a taboo thing to say anymore. Like taking control of how you raise your own children, as opposed to, I guess, the state knowing better or the government knowing better. Obviously, like we mentioned, you're covering those fundamental learning skills that they're going to need if they want to step into standard education at some point.
Yeah.
But with these smaller groups, I guess really picking the teacher like yourself, they can tailor so many other areas of, I guess, how they want the education to go, right? Like not every group would have to be necessarily the same in terms of their values or their structure.
Yeah. And the parents let me know what's important to them.
Yeah.
And then I tailor the learning to include all that. Trouble is, even though it might only be a small group, all of the parents, they'll agree on lots of things.
Yeah.
But, they all have differences.
Of course.
So sometimes it can be a bit tricky to please everyone. But I just say, look, I can't please everyone. I'm going to do my best. This is what I can offer.
Yeah.
It's not going to tick every single box, but you've got to think about the benefits that you get overall from this.
Yeah. And do the parents communicate with one another about how they can sort of combine the values of what they're going for?
They have lots of communication. Yeah, they meet up regularly. We have meetings. They talk to me all the time. There's one parent who runs it, or one mum and dad who kind of run the whole thing.
Yeah.
We feed back to them a lot. Yeah, and we have really open communication. And I always say to the parents, tell me straight away, as soon as something's happening, whether it's an issue with kids not being kind to each other, or, something that's gone on and I'm not aware of, let me know, because the sooner I know, the sooner we can adapt things to make it run smoothly, which you don't get in schools. No. With 25 kids, you just can't. You couldn't, even if all the parents were coming to you all the time, you couldn't facilitate that. It's too big.
Well, you get to communicate with the teacher, twice a year?
Yeah.
Or once a year? I can't remember how much.
Twice a year in parent-teacher conferences.
Twice a year for parent-teacher interviews? Yeah. So it's not a lot, and even then it can be, I guess, quite generic.
Yeah.
This is not to completely just put down teachers everywhere. Like, obviously we need teachers and everybody's doing their best. It's more of a systemic thing.
Absolutely. All the teachers I know are wonderful, caring, kind teachers. The problem is there's never enough time in the day to do all the jobs that they're expected to do.
Yeah.
So even though I went through a really hard and upsetting time of basically being kicked out the system and thinking I was never going to be able to teach again, when I compare my life now to that year of full-time teaching, my work-life balance is so much better for doing something that I'm so much happier doing. It's just win-win.
Blessing in disguise, right?
Yeah, it really is. And
from there, realistically, because I guess when we have conversations like this, I'm always looking towards the ideal, like how can everybody do this? How can the whole education system improve? And I love hearing opinions on it like yourselves. Realistically, for like the average parents and students out there, like how accessible is it to try and get into something like this? Like, is it far more expensive to be able to do it? Does it take a lot more time? Like what sort of family setup do people need to even think about getting into that?
Well, it depends where you go. Like most of these setups, I think, cost about $50 a day.
Yeah.
So it depends how many children you have as well. But it's not every day. It's usually most of these setups are just like 2 days a week.
Yeah.
Obviously, There's during school holidays, there's nothing to be paid there.
What's childcare is way more expensive than that, right? Isn't it like $200 a day, depending on where you can go?
So you think if you're paying $50 for 4 hours with a teacher, even if you were to get a tutor in, most tutors are like $60 to $80 an hour.
Yeah.
So
minimum.
And the kids are getting that whole socialization and learning how to work with others. I mean, I know financially it can be hard for some parents, particularly if they've got 3 or 4 kids.
Yeah.
And they do other stuff as well, so they do have tutors outside of this, and they do have sports and music and languages and things like that. So depending how you do it, it can really add up.
Yeah, because with more free, I guess they have much more free time throughout the week as well.
Yeah.
So how do you fill those hours?
Yeah.
Typically with hopefully really fun and awesome things to do.
Yeah.
But can cost money, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I know in Queensland, they're way more set up than we are down here.
How so?
There's just so many more of these groups.
Yeah.
Like particularly far north Queensland, like Port Douglas.
The relaxed hippie culture.
So many people up there did not get vaccinated. They're more aware of what's going on in the world. I was up there on holiday a couple of years ago, and they were like, move up here. We've got so much work for you. There's so many homeschool groups. We're always looking for more teachers. And I see it in the groups that I'm in online. There's so much work up there. So they're doing it really well.
Would you ever consider moving up there, or you like what you're doing here?
I suppose my husband's family is down here, so we'd be staying here. And my kids are happy here, so we'd probably stay. But
sounds like Melbourne needs the help.
Yes. Definitely.
We need as much help as we can get.
Yes.
And then throughout the week, so realistically, how much time do you think children actually need getting tutored throughout the week to be able to get an adequate education?
Well, it's different for every child.
Yeah.
So, some kids are going to be capable of doing a lot of independent study. Others are going to need a lot more one-on-one support. Some parents are better equipped to be able to teach their kids than others.
Yeah.
Hard to say. Like, really, I would like the group that I teach, I would love to have them 3 days a week. I think that way I could cover more and in more depth. But, for them, it's a financial constraint, and they have other things on as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, having that free time to, spend time on music and sport and everything else while they have the energy to do it as well, because there's only so much energy.
Yeah.
They have a lot of energy, don't get me wrong, but...
And the parents need to work as well.
Yeah.
So I think for them, to be able to drop their kids for 4 hours with me 2 days a week, for some of them, that's the only time they get to do their work.
Yeah.
Other than evenings or however they manage that in their family setup.
Yeah. How do they balance that? Because if you've got the children all the time or most of the time, well, it's generally most of the mums either don't work or they just work part-time, something from home, on their laptop, that kind of work. Yeah. So, if the family's in a situation where both parents working full-time, it's pretty difficult.
No, you wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
So that's a big consideration for most families when considering homeschooling. You do need one parent at home.
Yeah. So it is still a ways to go for a lot of people to be able to move in that direction.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. But now that I've been part of this world for a couple of years, I think if I had my time again with my kids, I'd have a lot more confidence to do this as a parent, and I can really see the value and just how useful it is and how much these kids get when you do it properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess there's a fear, right? It can be done really well. It can obviously be done poorly, but that's the same as any type of schooling for any child.
Yeah.
At least in this setup, it seems like you have a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom to be able to tailor it to the individual.
Yeah.
Where do you see it going? Do you think that this space is going to grow?
I hope so.
Do you think people are interested in it on a larger scale?
Definitely. Every day I'm hearing about, bumping into people and learning that they're doing it or they're considering it. And it's way more out there than even say 5 years ago. Like, I think when my kids were little, I maybe heard of a couple of people doing homeschooling, and now it's a lot more, there's a lot more interest in it. Yeah,
because I feel like 5-10 years ago, the typical view of it is just like jungle kids wearing no clothes, running around the bush, no structure whatsoever, just doing whatever they want, digging holes, getting dirty.
And there is still an element of that.
Which I think is essential. I think that stuff like that is important.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And some people do that. You know, they do complete like unschooling, deschooling. So there's different ways to do it.
Yeah.
I just think that with no kind of formal academic input, it could get to the point that those kids maybe do have some opportunities denied to them in the future.
Yeah. Like if they want to go to university or whatever it is that they're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so interested in how many of these, like what formal skills from traditional education system are essential, and then what is just sort of killing time.
Yeah, there's a lot of killing time in school.
How much of the typical traditional education system right now do you think is redundant or just not really beneficial?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
When I think about how much I cover with my kids in the short time that I have them, it's probably equivalent to them being in school like 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do a lot more because, you know, when you're in a traditional classroom, the task will be set for, say, an hour in maths, and there's your, you know, you do your teaching, and then you might do some small group work, and everyone will set a task. Now, a lot of people will finish early. So for half an hour, they just do some colouring in or a word search or whatever early finisher activity is available to them.
Yeah.
In my group, I can read the room, I can see how it's going. It's okay, everyone seems to be finishing, or these people are finished, these people are still going with that. Instantly, we can do something different together.
Yeah.
You know, there's no wasted time. They still get 2 breaks a day, so they still get like a recess and a lunch and outside plays, so they get all that time to be together and socialise. But when we're learning, it's deep learning. There's no bells. I adjust the day to seeing how it's going. You know, if we've covered something for half an hour and I can see they're done, they need a break, they look hungry, they look fidgety, it's like, stop, let's go, let's have a snack.
Yeah.
Let's go outside, we'll play a game. Then we get back into something, and they might go for an hour and a half with no break, totally focused, really engaged on what they're doing. In school, your classes may run for 50 to 60 minutes each.
Yeah.
Some kids are really in the zone, you know, they might want to keep going, but stop that, it's time for this.
Yeah.
You know? Or quick, finish, because the bell's going to go and you've got to go to PE, or we've got assembly, or, you know, you've got well-being or whatever. I don't need to teach well-being separately because it's taught all the time.
Of course, yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And the structure, there's no ability for the structure to change in a standard system. So like you mentioned, I feel like my attention span changes every single day in terms of how much energy I have, what I'm capable of. Some days you've got 20 minutes in you, some days you've got 2 hours in you.
Exactly.
And it saves so much time if you can work out how to call it at those moments. And like realistically, like focus time each day when it comes to study, like 4 hours is a long time.
Yeah. And they're so productive. They get so much done. And they'll often ask to do more, you know, or they'll ask a question and we'll just, everything that I had planned, put that to one side because the question that they're asking is way more interesting. They all want to know more about that. So we'll take that route. Whereas in a classroom, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You have to follow your script. You know, this is on your slides, this is in your planner, this needs to be covered today. If we don't cover it today, well, too bad, because tomorrow we're moving on to something else. Whereas in my group, I do a rough plan for the term. So every school holidays, I'll do a rough plan of what I want to cover in the term. But nothing is set in stone because this topic that the kids have chosen might take 3 weeks, it might take 6, you know, and we just adapt as we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then something else might come up that they're just super interested in. So I'll say, all right, we'll do that next, you know? And for maths, I try and make it more interesting by doing things like excursions. So last term, we took a walk from where we have our little group. We walked down the high street. We went to a coffee shop. Every kid could bring $5 in cash. and
cash.
Cash.
What a crazy concept.
I know. We're keeping cash alive. They had to order what they wanted from the coffee shop within their budget. So they had to do mental maths. Have you got enough for a cookie and a hot chocolate? If not, what else could you get? I asked the coffee shop owner to give each child a receipt as well. We took that back to our learning group. The first activity was they had to draw a map of the route that we'd taken with the landmarks. So they were covering geography as well, how long it took us, what did we notice along the way. And then they had to combine all their receipts and add up how much that they spent as a group.
Right on.
Yeah, we got play money out as well, and they had set up little shops, and so it's all that mental maths as well.
Yeah, and it's real life scenarios.
Real life.
Yeah,
yeah, and that made it more engaging. In class, you probably get a worksheet and say, if Johnny bought 3 apples and Susie bought 6 apples and each apple cost 10 cents, how much did the apples cost?
Give me PTSD.
Yeah. I'm like, we can do it in so much more engaging ways, but you do need smaller groups to do that. And you need to have the parents, I had a parent helper come with me so everybody was safe. And it's so much more fun. It's just stuff that you don't get to do in schools.
So it seems the reality is in order to curate the best sort of education, there needs to be those sort of strict number sort of limits in a sense. There needs to be not too many children per one teacher.
Yeah.
Because information gets lost.
Yeah.
Right? Pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Far out. And so from here with, let's say, these current group of students, do you believe that they're going to continue like this throughout high school as well? Or do you believe that they would want to, at some point, the parents want to go into high school or go into a standard structure?
At this point, they're all very keen to continue homeschooling. I really believe that's their path.
Yeah.
With their outlook on life, they're all very much dedicated homeschoolers.
Yeah.
We've had one child leave this year who went into a mainstream school, although it wasn't a traditional school. It was a very, very small school and almost like a homeschool setup.
Okay, yeah.
But a private school in the city.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And that's every day. So, they wanted that everyday kind of setup.
Okay, yeah.
But I think the rest of my group will stay.
Right on. Do you know any adults who have been through homeschooling?
No, I don't actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you?
I do. I know a few. Not too many.
Yeah.
Some I know personally, and then some of just sort of people that I follow and things like that. But I don't know. From what I've heard, they've all seemed to have a pretty positive experience from it. I mean, often a lot of the parents who have done it have, like you mentioned, have had the confidence to do it and believe that they've had the skills to do it. So it seems like they did.
I really admire the parents in my group.
Yeah.
They are so dedicated.
Yeah.
They put in so much to getting the best education for their kids. And I'm sure not everyone does it this way, but I couldn't ask for more. Just they're so invested in their kids' happiness and their future.
Yeah.
That they do make sacrifices in terms of time, money, energy. They put in so much to making sure that the group keeps running. Like the parents come in and clean the venue, they're all hands-on. They do market stalls so that the kids can practice, entrepreneurial skills and
right on.
Yeah, and to raise money, to raise funds for the group as well to pay the teachers and the venue and things like that. Whatever resources we need, which is minimal. I really try to keep that very, very basic for them. But they're just so happy to contribute and be super helpful. They're a pleasure to work with. And you can't say that often as a teacher. You will always have some very challenging parents when you work in schools.
Yeah, of course.
But these parents are amazing. They just make me feel so valued. They are so appreciative. Because they see how happy their kids are in their learning and spending time in our group.
And have you spoken to other other teachers who are maybe just mainstream teachers currently, do they hear your story and they're like, wow, that sounds incredible?
Yes. So I've worked in a few schools over the last year doing casual relief teaching. But for the last 6 months, I've just been in one school and I've been there basically 3 days a week. The teachers there, some of them, they love hearing my stories. It just blows their mind and they're like, oh, can I do this? You know, and there's actually a couple that I think if they could afford to step away from a full-time job, they would be straight in and they'd be ideal candidates.
Yeah.
Others, I have to be very careful about how I present things at school.
Of course.
You know, I do have to censor myself when I'm talking about certain things because, I don't want them to think that I'm completely lost the plot.
It's crazy that if you've taken a stand of choosing to not get vaccinated, particularly for a health reason that seems to make a lot of sense. I feel like if you explain it to the average person, like it does make sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To take that stand, you instantly put in this category of being crazy.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
It seemed like that a year ago or a couple of years ago, but I feel like a lot more people are waking up right now and just going like, why did we all do this?
Yeah,
like,
why did we all comply?
Yeah, like why did we all get these shots?
Mm-hmm.
Like why did it happen? I hear from a lot of people. I've had so many conversations with a lot of people who are just looking back and just going, well, that was useless. It didn't work. Like
exactly.
The logic is not really there in hindsight of like, well, why did I do it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because the pressure was so strong.
The pressure was so strong.
Social pressure as well. I know people that didn't need to get vaccinated because they didn't work, but they did it because they didn't want to look bad in front of others. They wanted to be able to go to restaurants, to the hairdresser, to the pub. So they just did it. They wanted to travel. No one was willing to take a stand against it for fear of looking like, a complete loon.
Yeah.
For me, it taught me a lot about my own inner strength and resilience.
Yeah.
And I'm generally, I'd say, a quietly confident person. I'm not, I don't like public speaking. I'm not.
But you're here right now.
Yeah, but this is different. But I just feel because it's important to spread the word of what's been happening, and to get it out there. But sometimes some people are so brainwashed that the conversations, you think you've accumulated so much knowledge I've accumulated so much knowledge over the last few years. How do you even have these conversations with some people? Because sometimes I don't even know what to say and what not to say without them having completely no understanding of what I'm talking about.
I fully agree. I've had a lot of these conversations with my partner because we're both in the same boat with this one. I haven't even really told my story on the podcast, and I'm sure it'll come out more and more over different episodes, but I didn't get vaccinated either and ended up leaving my job because we're being put in the same position, and I just thought it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
To me, I was just like, why would I get forced to do something that like literally no one can explain to me how it's going to help me other than it's going to help you.
Yeah.
Like just using phrases like it's good, it's going to help you, don't you worry, it's going to do X, Y, Z, but no one could actually logically explain how the vaccine could work and how it could actually help. And then it turns out in the end it didn't do any of the things that was coming through the media at that point in time. So I just thought it was ridiculous and held off. And an interesting kind of experience in the middle of this was being careful about how you communicate with, especially like whether it's friends or loved ones who have got vaccinated, and I'm sitting there genuinely believing that this vaccine could be doing some serious damage, right? And people that I like have done it. So I don't really want to sit there and go, well, now you've done it and you can't take it back, but this is how I feel about it, and I think it's going to be like possibly really negatively affect your health. Like, it's hard to, you don't want to say that to someone. So sometimes it's easier to just like, each to their own. Yeah. Hold off. I pleaded with a lot of people like close to me of like, just hold off, please. Just like hold off for a bit.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like that same sort of care or conversation was reciprocated.
Yeah.
Like people grew courage and bravery like I've never seen before because they had kind of this whole social presence behind them of saying yes to the vaccine, that everyone was so confident to just like attack straight away, which absolutely blew my mind. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to happen in the future, right? Because now we've seen something like this happen before, and undoubtedly, I hope not, touch wood, but potentially something like this could happen again.
Yeah.
Where we're all in the same position.
And how will people respond then? Will some learn lessons from this and say, no, I'm not going to comply? Or when you are threatened with losing your job again, do you just do it because you have to? You know, I mean, I feel really sorry for the people who did not want to take this at all, but, you know, they couldn't afford to not work.
And that's the reality, right? Like it sucks. There's a lot of people that, yeah, you can just tell the government to fuck off and tell your job to fuck off.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, if you've got a family that you're providing for and you need money, like it's a impossible position to be in. I feel so bad for everyone who is in that position who just felt like they didn't have a choice.
Same.
And particularly people just didn't have support. There was a lot of people who are just completely by themselves. They're thinking that way in their own mind.
Yeah.
But don't
and we
know
were
anyone
told,
else.
you know, do this and then we can get out of lockdown. And we were all so, you know, with such long lockdowns here. It was everyone just wanted to be free again.
Yeah.
So, I understand why some people did it.
Well, yeah, it gets to a point where you're just like, I'll do anything.
Yeah.
I'll do anything to get out of this. Like, I just want my life to go back to normal. So I'll do it.
Yeah.
I think they're giving out 8th doses in Queensland at somewhere. Like,
you get to the point where you think, surely have those people not read any of the side effects? You know, how do they not have any information about the other side of this? How are you still signing up for that? How are you still so brainwashed and manipulated to believe that this can be effective and help you?
Yeah, I mean, they did a great job through standard media, right? So if all you do is listen to the radio and watch public TV, then the reality is you're getting just this one narrative. I don't think I ever saw anything on normal TV that indicated that it would be good to think about it or there's some possible negative side effects until everybody's already 3 doses deep.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically. And now we're seeing all of these different things pop up all over the world where the average person is now looking at it going, like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But you're right. I don't know how people are going to respond in the future because, if you put in the same position where you need money and you're told by your workplace that you lose your job if you don't comply in some way.
Yeah.
Nothing's really changed, right? Like
exactly.
Everyone's in the same spot.
Yeah. Which is why I'm really happy to be working in the homeschool space as well, because I feel that if something awful did happen again, I would still have 3 days a week of working, so I'd still be able to work.
Yeah.
And the 2 days that I work in mainstream school, if I get kicked out of that system again, that's okay. That's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
I really do it to keep up my teaching accreditation.
Yeah. So do you have to be working inside of school to be able to maintain?
So you have.
How does it work?
So you do your VIT, which is your Victorian Institute of Teaching accreditation, every year.
Okay.
And to be able to maintain that, you have to have taught for 20 days a year in a school. So it can be a Catholic school, an independent or state school. And then you have to do 20 hours of professional development a year. You also have to keep up your first aid, CPR, that kind of stuff.
Okay, yeah.
But the year runs from September to September. So I've already done my 20 days for this year.
Yeah.
So, I'm good for a year anyway.
Does it roll over? Like if you do a whole year, does it hold on for 5?
No, unfortunately.
Get up 100 days of teaching?
No.
Yeah, right. Do you feel like that's a problem?
What, the accreditation?
Yeah, just in terms of still having to be a part of that system, or do you think that that's still a pretty beneficial thing for teachers?
I'm quite happy doing the CRT work. Like the school that I'm at is a really lovely school.
Yeah.
And I think I learn a lot from doing that. It makes, like, one day I could be teaching prep, the next day I could be teaching grade 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So it really keeps me on my toes. I'm learning new things. You know, there's all the behavior management side that you're learning. It's nice to talk to other teachers as well and have those kind of professional discussions.
Yeah.
And to be part of that. It's a small school, so it's a really nice community as well.
Yeah.
So it definitely has its benefits.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I've always been interested just in the different ways of educating, because my mother works at a Steiner school. And so I went to a Steiner school only very briefly, but it was quite a ways from where we live. So I only went there when I first started school, and then ended up going to a state school, which was good for me. It was close, you know, kept me going somewhere on a day-to-day. But I still look back at those times and thinking, I don't know how many days I really needed to be at school to get the social element and get the skills that I needed. But seeing even how they operate at the Steiner school, where they've got the same class from like prep to
7 years
to all the way up. Yeah, sometimes to year 12, right? Gee. It's like the same group of 20 students or whatever working together, like
with the same teacher.
I think they have different teachers, but it's the same group of students, I believe. I think in primary school it might be with the same...
because a friend of mine was a teacher and he taught for 7 years the same group of students.
So by the end of 7 years, like the connections that they've developed is absolutely crazy. And I think that they've got, like, they all have to learn a stringed instrument up to year 8 or year 9 or something like that. So even seeing that way of life I thought pretty cool, and I think there's a lot of people from those schools that were in the exact same boat in terms of the vaccination and just going, nah.
Yeah. And I was surprised that the Steiner schools did enforce it.
I was surprised as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty...
Yeah.
What surprised me a lot is, like, lots of the communities or the types of people that I would have expected to be like, this is ridiculous, no way, were some of the biggest ambassadors for it. When did that happen? It was like what we would call like the hippie alternative movement was suddenly the most woke people pushing this agenda.
I don't get it either.
How did that happen?
It's like the small cooperative school that's parent-led that I was mentioned earlier. I know of families that left that setup and went into state schools because they had to be vaccinated as parents to even have their kids go into the co-op. So they went to a state school because the parents didn't have to be vaccinated.
Whoa.
I mean, they were like really hardcore about it.
Yeah, so I guess there is that freedom for institutions that do have the ability to pick their own rules, and it can sometimes be a lot more extreme, right, and a lot more intense. And I don't know how that happened. It was crazy. I feel like more people that previous to 2020 you'd consider, I guess, right-wing sort of
isn't it funny? It's all flipped.
It's completely flipped. Now they're the people who are all taking a stand and going, no way, thinking it's ridiculous and kind of seeming like they're taking more of a logical, rational approach to it. And they're the ones who will push back more. Yeah,
it's completely flipped. Because I would have in the past considered myself like more left, but now a lot of people would consider me like a right-wing activist, extremist.
Right-wing extremist. Yeah.
And I'm like, no, these are just normal values.
Well, you've lived your life with pretty like liberal views, left-wing views, holistic views, which were definitely not considered right-wing at all. And then suddenly you get put in that category. Yeah. Oh, it blows my mind. It's very refreshing to hear you speak about this, and it's really cool to hear the direction that this education system is moving. Like, prior to when you started in university to do this, like, I don't know, what life did you live that gave you the ability to think like this, basically, and have this sort of perspective on the world? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, but I think that's a lot of it. So I'm born in South Africa to British parents.
Which you were just there, right?
Yeah.
Was it nice?
Yeah, it was lovely.
Yeah, nice.
Then when I was little, we moved back to England for a few years, then back to South Africa. Then when I was 19, I moved to England and lived there till I was 36. And then at 36, moved to Melbourne. So, and I've been here 13 years now.
Yeah.
So a lot of travel in my life. I met my husband when I was 21 in London. He owned a body piercing shop.
Right on.
And then he branched out into tattooing and tattoo supplies, and I worked with him for a while. So it was a very big international company, and we traveled a lot. And, you know, I was a goth. He was a psychobilly. You know, we were always very alternative.
Yeah.
And I think because of the people we mixed with, we've always been really open-minded, really accepting of all walks of life. You know, there's a lot of freaks in that industry, and we love them all. So I think, and living in London for that many years as well, I think we were just, you know, just really, we didn't have this closed, narrow-minded, small worldview.
Yeah.
I think travel has a lot to do with that as well.
Seeing just what's happening in different parts of the world, how it changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because there's I guess fundamental like humanistic morality, I guess, however that sort of is inherent in all people. But then in terms of the ethical codes that different societies run off can be completely different, right?
Yeah.
And so is this how you've gotten all your tattoos? Has your husband done lots of these?
No, he doesn't tattoo. He just pierced.
Oh.
But we had tattoo shops as well. And yeah, we just traveled and collected our artwork.
Right on. That's awesome. And so you were in this scene, so weren't typically living what you would consider a standard mainstream lifestyle.
No.
Did you ever come across things like this in the past? Like obviously COVID's an extreme example that we've faced, but has there ever been anything in the past where you've sort of been put in a similar sort of position where you've had to be like, no, not going down that path, where you've had to go against the narrative?
Nothing that was really inflicted by the government, I'd say, but even like just getting my arms tattooed, my sleeves done when I was 26, I know nowadays that's really normal, like it's no big deal. But back then that was really extreme for a woman to commit to that.
Yeah.
Because you were kind of cutting yourself off from job opportunities, you know? And then even later in life, when I was doing my teaching degree, I was concerned that, you know, I wouldn't be hired at schools because people would view me as, you know, not looking how a teacher should look.
Prim and proper.
Yeah. But I think I've always been a bit unusual. Like people, when they speak to me, they're like, the way you speak and the way you present yourself is so different. Yeah. You know, you're like this strange kind of, like I've always think I've read a lot. You know, I love learning. I'm always studying. So I can be quite articulate on lots of different subjects, but then I present in a very different way, you know, and people can be a bit misguided. It's like, don't judge a book by its cover.
Of course. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess if people are simply just listening to this and they don't watch it, it'd be interesting to know what image they have in their mind as opposed to looking at the whole scene.
Yeah.
But you're right, you do articulate yourself quite well, which I think is important, right? Especially if for people moving into the future, anyone who wants to take an alternative sort of lifestyle, whether it's homeschooling, whether it's something else, anything that isn't fitting with the mainstream, it doesn't really help the case if you don't sound intelligent about what you're doing, does it? Like it makes it a lot more palatable, even listening to yourself and talking about this, just because you have the ability to talk about it, you know, quite well and actually explain and justify what you're doing, as opposed to, I think there's still a lot of I've met a lot of people out there who have chosen the no-vax path who I'm like, you're off the Richter.
Yeah, same.
Like you actually are crazy. Yeah. Like you're not doing this from a logical perspective. We get put in that
basket sometimes. Like, no, I'm not like that.
Yeah, I've gone through like a few different events from people that I follow around Melbourne who have run some meetups. Just at different bars and things like that, where people who, for whatever reason, were affected from COVID in different ways, whether it was jobs or vaccines or however, and caught up with a lot of people. And just like anything, you know, it's there's a lot of kooky people on both sides, you know, who don't seem to be thinking about why they're choosing to do it or to not do it. It's kind of just happening around them, basically. How do you think people can begin educating themselves for, if anyone listens to this, there's parents out there who maybe they've just had kids or they're thinking about having kids or whoever, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do people start down the path of building themselves into a person or a parent that can take control of their child's education?
I think if you want to do the homeschool route, to get support from some of the many online organisations and groups that are out there, they will guide you. And, it's step by step. They tell you exactly what you need to, if your kid is in school, how to get them out of school. If you don't want to be schooled at all, you do need to be deregistered from schools as well. There's government boxes that you have to tick.
Yeah.
Those organisations really hold your hand and help you through all that. And then they can put you in touch with local groups as well, so that you've got that, community around you. Because it does take a community to build a child.
Yeah.
And I think the children that are in my homeschool community, they know all the parents that are involved. They know all the siblings. They're really close with their teachers. They feel really nurtured and supported throughout their learning. And they know they're valued as a person. Whereas in schools, you're very often overlooked. Often it's just the kids who are really demanding or have challenging behaviours that seem to get all the attention. And a lot of the kids who are maybe just, always doing the right thing and doing the best that they can, they often get overlooked. So
Yeah.
I think in the homeschool setup, like we've established, the children get a lot more one-on-one attention. They get all their needs met far better than in a regular school setup. So it's definitely worth, even if you're just a little bit curious or interested, to join some of those groups and just ask all the questions, because there's so many parents in there that can help you, and help you form that community around you.
That's incredible. And do you think that, obviously one of the difficult parts is justifying to your friends and family why you'll be making those decisions, which I can imagine can be quite difficult. Like if you're a new parent and you're in different mothers groups or different parental sort of groups where you're hanging out with other parents, trying to explain or justify why you'd want to make that decision, I can imagine is pretty difficult for parents, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And you do have to have a certain level of confidence and belief in yourself that it's the best choice for your family.
Yeah.
And you generally will surround yourself by like-minded people. Like, yes, your kids might go to a swimming group, with children who are not being homeschooled.
Yeah.
But that's good. You need to meet people from all walks of life. But generally, the homeschool community rallies around each other.
Yeah.
And they do so many different things together. Like my group go on camps together. They do birthdays together. We have social meetups. It's just a really great community to be a part of. And I would really recommend it. So even if you've got the slightest little thought about it, just explore it.
Start looking into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Have a trial. Give it a go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can always go back, right? Like you can always transition back into the mainstream if it's not something that works for you, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Do the kids, obviously this can vary quite a lot depending on the age of the children, and I guess what you want them to be exposed to and their level of understanding. I don't spend a whole lot of time around children, so I wouldn't say that I'm qualified to know what sort of information a child at a different age can handle. But do they understand why they're in homeschool?
Yeah. Yeah, they do. Their parents are very open about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do they feel about it?
They are so funny. Some of the comments that they come out with, like about Dan Andrews and things like that, I'm like, I love you guys, because they're awake. They're completely awake to what's going on in the world, to a point where it's hard because you don't want your children to be worried about the state of the world.
Yeah.
Like, it's a heavy burden. Sometimes I feel like I have too much knowledge, and if I was younger, it might be hard to deal with that.
Yeah.
But the parents have done a really good job on what their kids know about. It's I think the way you present information to your children, and the parents want their kids to know what boundaries they need to have as well, when to know when something is safe or not safe for them.
Yeah.
So they've given them enough information to make them feel safe and know their own boundaries.
Because it's a fine line, right? Obviously, and I totally agree. I think that sometimes coming to a realization that possibly not all of society is set up right now to in your best interest potentially is a pretty big thing to deal with. And I know when you have these conversations, sometimes it can just sound doom and gloom the whole time, and it can get quite depressing, and it's like, oh, everything's falling apart, everything's horrible, you know, that kind of thing. And I definitely don't want these conversations to just lean on that. You know, I've got a very hopeful perspective for the future. You know, I think everything that's happened has kind of lit a little fire under everybody, and it's starting to shine a light on
definitely
a way to really build and, you know, push society in a really beautiful direction, especially if there's lots of these children are going to be adults in
I'm so hopeful
20 years,
especially with them as the future.
Yeah.
You know, and the things that their parents are teaching them about life in general, like really healthy eating for one, to protect them into the future. You know, they learn about how to make bread, and they know all the nutrients that they need. They make healthy food choices most of the time. They learn how to plant and grow their own food at home. I held a workshop at my house for them for 3 weeks, and we learned all about the bees and the impact that the bees have on the world. And like, we're all becoming more self-sufficient, I think. And I think that's really important. Like, if we can do that kind of stuff and take charge of our own lives. Like, these holidays, I've been learning about medicinal herbs and food and how we can implement that into our diet, and getting away from the pharmaceutical processes and practices in our life. So there's so much hope, and there's so much you can just keep learning about and implementing small changes in your life to improve the quality of your life, your own health, your family's health. And these kids are learning all that stuff from their parents.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I think that they're picking this stuff up at such a young age. By the time they're 18, 20 years old, they're going to be masters at it.
Yeah.
They're going to have a way better understanding and have an ability to set their lives up like that from the get-go, I guess.
And I love the way, like, we do a lot of debating in our group. Because it's not all about written tasks. I really like the kids to use their voice as well. And for some of them that struggle with writing, for me, I know that just because a kid can't put the words on paper doesn't mean they don't have that information. So we do as many oral tasks as possible. And I'll get them to discuss with each other and debate, you know, reasons for and against different things. And the level of conversations that my homeschool kids have compared to kids in mainstream school, I'm like, wow, these guys can really think deep, you know.
So just their ability to actually like articulate the knowledge that they have inside.
And listen to another person's point of view. And challenge them on that, but politely. You know, all these skills are stuff that they've really honed over the last year in particular as well. It's like, there's not just right and wrong. There's not just black and white. You know, you can have your opinion. Somebody else can have their opinion. You can still be friends, you know?
Yeah. I reckon that's one of the most important skills that a human can have. Like, the ability to communicate at that level is, some people are really good at working things out in their own mind, you know, and with themselves. But I feel like and I don't know if you see this with children, but a lot of people learn from having feedback from somebody else, like trying an idea out with someone and them liking it, disliking it, having a different opinion, and just like what we're doing right now, having a conversation and trying to work out, you know, what's the commonality in the middle. And I definitely heard from a lot of parents that their children throughout lockdowns completely lost that skill in a lot of ways in terms of just communication, because they weren't doing it at all. Like, I spoke to a lot of parents who had children who were like 5 years old and then didn't go to school for like 2 years and couldn't like couldn't talk basically, like could not communicate anywhere near the level that they should have because they were just never exposed to it for the first few years of their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which blows my mind.
Even in 2021, when I was teaching a grade 1 class, it was still, we had to wear masks every day, and there was so much loss. Like children couldn't see your facial expressions. I never wore a mask in class. I always took it off and just put it on when the principal was coming around. Because kids need to see that you're smiling, There's so much non-verbal cues that go on. And when everyone's covered in a mask, it was so bad for learning. They didn't talk as much because you couldn't hear very well.
So you're like, why bother?
Yeah. It was their social and emotional learning in 2020 and 2021 across the board, no matter what school I went to, it was down. There were massive impacts on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I am interested, just because you touched on it, I'm super interested in food and how people eat, and it, once you go down the food rabbit hole, it starts to expose a lot of things about the world. In terms of just the way that you eat and like what you're doing with the kids, like what's your way of getting your food and sourcing your food and making your food just in like your personal lifestyle?
So we've got a really good veggie garden at home.
Yeah.
And we have our beehives as well.
Yeah,
so
nice.
We have honey in as much as we can.
Thanks for bringing me some, by the way.
You're welcome. I haven't eaten meat since I was 14.
Yeah.
Or chicken. I do eat fish in the last 10 or 15 years.
Why did you make that change?
I loved the Smiths, and they had a song called Meat is Murder. So at 14, I was like, yes. But I also never really liked eating it. So I was like, well, what's the point of killing an animal and I don't even really enjoy it?
Yeah.
But and now it's just gone too far. Like I don't think I could ever eat meat again.
Yeah.
And not that I do cook meat for my family. It doesn't bother me. I would prefer someone to hunt their own meat and eat it than
of course
just buy it from the supermarket. I think in my family, particularly my daughter, she's really into completely clean eating, no preservatives. She makes everything from scratch.
Is that something she's picked up from you, or?
I think ever since she was tiny, she's been a really adventurous eater.
Yeah.
And always had a very sophisticated palate as well. She loves flavour. But I think as she's got older, she's just learned the benefits of eating clean.
Yeah.
So she's actually taught me a lot. And I'm now off sugar as well. She's convinced me, and, I've done a lot of learning through that.
Yeah.
I've also seen how things are linked. Whoever owns the pharmaceutical companies also owns the food companies. It's all linked, and I don't trust any of them. I've never really liked fast food, luckily. I feel better when I eat clean, and I think I want to live a long and healthy life.
Yeah.
If I can avoid diabetes, if I can avoid cancers, heart disease, I think I have more control over that by eating as clean as possible. Yeah.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. I think it's something that a lot of people need to hear. Not everybody can do everything, but everybody can move in that direction a lot more. And it's becoming clear. We've done another podcast, which will be released at some point with my partner, where we go into food quite a lot. And the same thing, we were just talking about how you walk down the aisle now and everything's poison. Like you almost have to be a chemist to be able to work out how to just have clean living and clean food to be able to get it.
Preservatives in everything, sugar in everything.
Stopping sugar is a big one. Hey,
it's huge.
I wouldn't say I eat a lot of sugar, but I definitely eat sugar. And I did a month off, and I had headaches for like 5 days, just trying to go through the withdrawals from it. It was crazy, but it was the craziest experience of just after maybe about a week of no sugar, the taste of just like regular plain food exploded.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't believe how tasty everything was. Like your taste buds like reactivated.
Yeah. Well, I've always loved eating chocolate and sweets like in the evening. I've done it like every single night.
Yeah.
And I think it's only been like a month or two for me that I have like last year gradually, like I don't have sugar in coffee anymore. I've really reduced it.
Yeah.
And I don't say I don't ever have it, but I've made a real conscious effort to really, really reduce it. And the easiest way to do that is with substitutes. So I'm lucky because my daughter makes really lovely sweet treats with no sugar in.
Yeah.
Because she's done so much research, and she'll put dates and she'll put honey and all sorts of monk fruit.
Maple syrup. And
all sorts of things. Yeah. So it's still, you've satisfied that kind of urge is quenched. So I've had something sweet in the evening, but it might be, made with nuts and cacao powder and dates and honey, but it's still like having that action of eating something enjoyable without the sugar.
And once you're off sugar, things like that taste incredible.
Exactly.
So good. And it tastes better than sugar.
Yeah. But I think it's understanding. You need a lot of knowledge. And luckily she does. She's got far more than me. So I totally trust, whatever she's making, and it's delicious. So and you got to meal prep though. You've got to be organized.
You have to be prepared, right?
Yeah.
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 It seems important. Like there's some realities to this situation right now, and it's if you want to live in these ways, it requires educating yourself and it requires taking control.
It's a bit of effort.
It is a bit of effort. There's no way around it. But once you have this knowledge, it lasts forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the best thing.
Yeah.
How do you balance the fact of cooking meat for your family and then not having meat for yourself? Does that ever matter to you?
Doesn't bother me.
Doesn't really matter?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, often my husband will barbecue meat and then I'll just cook the veggies on the side.
Yeah.
Or like we all eat quite differently in our family. So I've always adapted meals to suit everyone.
Yeah.
Not that I'm making something different for everyone, but it will be, someone will just have that and someone will have a bit of this and a bit of that and someone will have that.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me.
And how have you felt? I guess it's probably hard from a point of reference if you were 14 when you made this change, but in terms of day-to-day life and how your body and your brain and everything feels living on I guess basically plant-based sort of diet, how do you feel living like that?
Apart from the brain aneurysm, I've always been super healthy.
Yeah. Did they give you any reason for that?
No.
Just a freak of nature sort of thing?
I mean, they said I could have been living with it my whole life because it's basically just one of the vessels in the brain can expand and then sometimes it bursts. And that's what happened, it burst. And you don't know why. So, was that an extreme event? Like you rushed to hospital? You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. I'm really quite hardcore with my pain tolerance level. So it felt like my head was being squeezed in a vice grip and I just dropped to the floor, vomiting, like fever, couldn't see properly. My neck was so painful. So I thought it was a migraine because I've never had a migraine before. And I went to bed, didn't sleep all night. My husband got me migraine medicine. It didn't even take the edge off. So I went 48 hours before I even went to the doctor.
Holy shit.
And he sent me straight to hospital. And that was in the evening. And the next morning they did brain surgery.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah, it was.
That is so extreme.
Yeah, I was very lucky because I didn't have to have they didn't have to open my skull.
It was like keyhole.
No, they actually do it through the groin.
What? Oh, so they go up through your
they send like a platinum coil right up and then it's all guided by X-ray and they implant this platinum coil inside your brain so that it kind of packs it so it can't go again. And then I have an MRI every year to check that no more are forming.
So what does it do? I got a really rudimentary way of understanding this, but like a vein explodes, kind of thing, like some small.
Yeah. So then there's blood bleeding into your brain, which is the most excruciating pain I have ever had. Sorry.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was awful.
But you've recovered from this?
Yeah, I was in hospital for 12 days. On day 8, I submitted an assignment, a uni assignment. And then 6 weeks later, I did my final maths exams for that year, still got high distinctions. But
Nailed it.
Yeah, but it was hard. Like I couldn't remember things. So it was constant studying 8 hours a day, going back the next day, not remembering what I'd written down the day before. It was an exercise in absolute resilience and determination.
Because that can get pretty defeating.
Well, I was offered, I was told I could defer and, do it next year. I was like, no, I'm not giving up.
Yeah.
Kept going. And then I still had another year of uni after that. But I graduated with the highest academic achievement award for the cohort. And that's not because I'm super academic. That's just because I worked and worked and worked really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. Well,
the doctors were blown away by that. They couldn't believe it.
I can't believe it. That's extreme. Well, I'm glad you made it through it.
Yeah. I think I was really scared because for the first week after surgery, I couldn't even read a book. And I love reading. I read every night.
Yeah.
And I was really scared. And I thought, wow, if I can't read or study again, like my life is over. That felt awful. But by day 8, I was back to it.
And what's your process of educating yourself? Obviously, you've gone through formal education, but just in terms of following your personal interests, like what are you reading right now? Like, what do you read?
Okay, so I'm always studying something.
Yeah.
I'm always doing online courses, a lot to do with teaching, just for further development.
Yeah.
But there's only one genre that I read for fun, and that's historical fiction.
My favourite.
Oh,
My
really?
favourite. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love anything to do with
it's educational at the same time.
Yeah, you learn so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. So you balance that and then you're reading, non-fiction stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Nice. And you read every day?
Every day, yeah.
Good stuff. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming in and having this conversation. Yeah, you've got a lot of knowledge and it's really, really valuable. And I truly do believe that the education system is going to change. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, it has to. I really hope it does.
I think it's going to. I think that it's going to, unless they change it dramatically, it's going to start to prove less and less helpful as time goes on. And I think more and more parents are waking up to that fact potentially.
Yeah.
And it's not like it has to disappear. I'm not saying that, but giving parents the option to be able to take back control and choose the way that they want their children to be raised. And if they can't do it themselves, have people like yourself and certain support groups and different systems around to be able to get that education that you want, I think is so important because the world's only getting crazier, and to prepare our young people for it, there's a lot that I wish I learned when I was younger, which I just didn't, which didn't prepare me for a lot of things that have happened over the last few years. So the fact that you're helping kids get that today is really, really awesome.
Yeah, I love it. It's really rewarding.
It's amazing. I guess from here, I don't know, is there any final words to the parents out there? Anything that they need to know?
Just if you're curious, look into homeschooling.
Yeah.
Because as a teacher, comparing both, systems, I'd say I wish I'd done this for my kids when they were young, if I'd known more about it.
Yeah.
It can have challenges and requires a lot of dedication from parents. But if it's done right, it's done in a much better way. They get a much more well-rounded education. And they learn how to think more independently and be critical thinkers.
Yeah, which I think is going to be essential for the future that's coming.
It's a skill that they need.
Yeah, it's a skill that we all need.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming in. Thank you so much for having this chat.
You're very welcome.
It's been awesome and I've learned a lot, which I appreciate as well.
No problem.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Dylan.
Awesome. I hope to do it again at some point in the future because you got a wealth of knowledge.
Sure, I'd love it.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thanks.
All right. Peace out, everybody. Awesome. Cheers. Have a good one.